One is that you're really starting a relationship when you retain a builder or a general contractor, and as much as you'd like it to go very quickly, it doesn't. It's New Jersey, so everything takes 47 times longer than it should. From the time that you first start working with someone until the time that your project is done, often it is a year.
Yeah.
And the actual construction, Tim and I say all the time, the easiest part of what we do sometimes is the construction. The inspections in New Jersey, in Ocean County, most towns have between 26 and 32 inspections for a house. New Jersey mandates 4 inspections. That's what the state requires. The rest of them are township inspections. So you lose a lot of time in inspections, and you lose a lot of time in engineering and architectural design and permitting and waiting. And then once you finally get started, the construction can take as long as the design. But the point that Jason was making, which is a really good point, you're working with your builder or general contractor for a long time. So not rushing is so vitally important because you want to make sure that the person you're dealing with, yes, you want them to be solvent. You want to go to their offices. You want to see them. You want to go to their jobs and get references. You want to check them out with the town that you're in and go to the building department and say, is there anything bad about this such and such contractor or such and such builder? You want to do that, but most importantly, you want to like the person because you're going to interact with them quite a bit. Very, very rarely, especially with an elevation job or any custom home for that matter, very rarely does a project start and go completely through to the end without changes and input and alterations, and it's just common. So you really want to, once you vet, if you're picking between 2 contractors or 2 builders, and they're about the same price, but one you're really comfortable with and one you're just not that comfortable with, you're better off going with the person you're comfortable with because you are going to live with them for a while. So that's a point really well taken. And in terms of insurance, Jason touched on that. Again, we're doing some of the stuff that Kathy does. She gives a great consumer protection presentation, but it's not just liability insurance. Yes, everybody has to have general liability insurance in order to get licensed in New Jersey. You need to also have workers' comp insurance and not just on one person in the company and hire temporary labor. Again, the type of people that we deal with, DeVoot House Lifting, and as well as ourselves, everyone is covered by workers' comp insurance. We have full general liability and umbrella policy, but more importantly, DeVoot has cargo insurance and riggers insurance, which is a vital, very important aspect of home elevation. So that's another thing that you want to make sure that you verify. The people that you're dealing with, New Jersey did something very smart. I'm not in favor of more legislature, and I'm not in favor of more rules in general. But a few years ago, they did make house lifting a separately licensed trade. Thank God, because before that, anybody who could build a deck could also go buy a bunch of bottle jacks and try and lift a house, and that's what people were doing. So Jason touched on it. Everything that he does, every house lifter now in New Jersey, they use a unified jacking machine, which means that all points of the house are going up and being monitored exactly at the same time. So that was a great tip.
Bottle jacks anymore?
Not anymore. Oh God. Okay.
Oh my God.
Let me see where I am here. Anybody have any questions? Just okay. All right. Good. Let me see. If you are planning on, you should assume that from the time you start. Let's talk about time frames. How long do things actually take? You should assume that your design stage, where you're creating your plan. Again, we do turnkey operations generally for most of our clients. We do everything from soil and engineering analysis through foundation and engineering design, architectural design if needed, and then we build it and then we do everything. But for your design stage, it is not unreasonable to take several months. So from the time you come up with a concept, from the time that you meet with us and say, listen, we want to raise our house 5 feet. Okay, fine. Well, that whole period of time between the soil boring and the architecture and the piling plan, if necessary, and the cribbing diagram, that's a couple of months right there. Once the permit application is submitted to the township, it's generally a month to a month and a half. It should be less, but it never is. Once you start your project, typical elevation project takes in the 4 to 5 month range, and a typical new home project usually takes a month or two longer based on the fact that there are more inspections. So from when you first start interviewing builders or contractors, it could be a year for a single house. Now, if you have a plan, obviously you take 2 months off. If you've done certain work yourself, but that's about the time frame that you're looking at. ICC, if anybody doesn't know about it, we have through October of 2018. ICC stands for Increased Cost of Compliance, $30,000 that you can get from your insurance company to elevate your home. So if you are below the minimum flood elevation now, and you had flood insurance at the time of Sandy, and you want to elevate your house, your insurance company gives you $30,000. It's not a loan, it's a grant, and it's a rider in every flood insurance policy in the country. So if that applies to anybody, that expires at the end of October of next year, unless they extend it again. Just touching a little bit on the cost benefit of elevating versus renovating versus building new, and another point that Jason made was, you know, when you want to find and retain a professional who is concerned with the correct thing to do for you. You do not want someone to say, I can think of a dozen times that Jason's gone out to look at homes that we're elevating, and he has said, why did you sell this client an elevation? This house should come down. This house should not be elevated. It's 60 years old. It's a bungalow. It's garbage. It should be knocked down, and a new house should be built. Now, here, this is an example. This is how we do business. This is how he does business. That's why we do business together. But he's coming out because I called him to elevate a house, and he's saying, why don't you tell these people that it's going to be a few dollars more and let them build a new house? And I say, Jason, you think I didn't mention that? You think I didn't tell him that or offer him that option? So you want to find someone who sits with you and takes the time to ask you, what is it exactly that you're looking for? And then once that's narrowed down, okay, well, what are you looking for in your house? How are you living in your house? How many people are going to live there? Is it a primary residence or secondary residence? What are you using it for? How long are you keeping your house? Are you keeping your house for just a few years and you're moving to Florida? Okay, that's a different house than if you say, okay, that's our house, we're staying there for the rest of our lives. But if you're staying there for the rest of your life, well, maybe you put that elevator in, or maybe you build an elevator shaft because in 10 or 15 years you don't want to walk up 14 stairs. Whereas if you're retiring to Florida in 3 years, well, okay, you're in your 50s and you walk upstairs and then you leave. You go buy a ranch in Florida and then it gets blown down in a hurricane. No, that's not true. That's not nice. That's bad. So you really want to work with people who are going to take the time to listen to you and find out what it is that you want and what you need. So that's why when Sandy hit in 2012, we started getting calls from clients that we'd done business with over the years, for many, many years, who we'd sold 3, 4, 5 new homes, and they said, we had a second home out on the island and we want to elevate it, and what should we do? And I was like, we really don't want to do, we don't do that business, and I never wanted to do the business, but then that was all the business there was, and everybody was calling us, and nobody else knew how to do it. It was very difficult. So we got into the business. But we still, now, whether you meet with me or Lou or Joe, we go out and we say to you, what's the best thing for you, for your property? Because every property is different. I mean, other than somebody who has a lot and says, hey, I want to build a house. Okay, well, that's different. But other than that, sometimes it needs conversation and you need to get to the solution. So you want somebody who's going to actually be able to talk to you and find out what it is that you need, as opposed to going out and selling you something that they offer. Completely different thing. Okay, I mentioned heights. We want to make sure we're at least at base flood +3. Now, flood elevations, by the way, I know many of you probably have heard this, some of you haven't. The word elevation, the only definition of elevation is distance in vertical feet from the beach at the ocean. That's all that means. So when you, on your flood elevation certificate or your survey, it says finished floor elevation 6.2, all that means is it's 6.2 vertical feet from the ocean beach. That's all that means. So when you're looking at that, keep in mind that that's different from elevating your home 4 feet. So if you say, I want to elevate my home 4 feet, that means you're lifting your house up 4 feet. That has nothing to do with the actual elevation. So when I talk about base flood and going base flood +3 at a minimum, because it gets you your best flood insurance rates, I'm talking about the base flood for your house, the zone that you're in. It's an AE7, an AE6, an AE8, that number +3 feet. So if your house, for example, if you're in an AE8 and your ground is elevation 5 and your house right now is 2 feet off the ground and it's elevation 7, that means you're 1 foot below base flood. Now you have to be base flood +1 minimum. So the minimum that you'd have to elevate your house would be 2 feet. That's what I'm trying to say. So the important takeaway is, how high do we want to go? Well, we want to find out what our base flood is, and if it's base flood is 6, we want to elevate to 9. We want our finished floor to be 9. Now, with a new house, if the house is going up on pilings and there's a downstairs, it's usually a mood issue. Usually it's base flood +5 or 6, so there's not a big deal. But with an existing house, when you're doing an elevation, you want to make sure that you get to that base flood +3. Another aspect about what can be done in a flood elevation. What can we do? What are we allowed to do by code underneath the house in the garage, in this new area? So we're lifting up a house, or we're building a house, and the downstairs, the basement, the garage, the lower level, that's in the floodplain. That might be 2 feet below base flood. So what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to do 3 things. You can park there, you can have an entry there to go up into your house, and you can store non-essential items, which means anything that you don't care if it's insured and you don't care if you lose it. You can't have living space downstairs. So when you elevate, and if you're contemplating either building or elevating, in our opinion, 90% of the time, it's cost effective to go to a full height elevation, because you're creating all this extra space, which you can use. And everybody who's done it uses it for playrooms and rec rooms and every other thing. And
can I do partitions made out of sheetrock?
Sure. Sure. Yes. That's a good question. If you want to finish downstairs in the floodplain, can you finish the downstairs space? Yes, you can.
To what extent?
Anything under base flood has to be waterproof.
Sheetrock is not.
Well, Den's glass. You use Den's glass, which is cement board, which is.
Oh, you mean green board?
No. It's concrete. It's concrete board.
Concrete exterior.
It's a concrete board. So if this is the elevation of your lower level, where I'm standing, and the base flood is here, so it's 4 feet off your garage or your basement level. Anything below this 4 feet has to be Den's glass. has to be waterproof
So I can
material.
make partitions
Yes,
out of the...
yes, you have to use pressure-treated wood, and you have to use dense glass below base flood. Above base flood, you can use regular
cinder
sheetrock.
block?
Cinder block is fine.
Yeah.
Cinder block's waterproof.
A
Yes.
lot of times though, those partitions you put in, just make sure they're on the plan at the beginning, because when the engineer designs in your flood vents,
Right, very
if you
good point.
put partitions,
Yeah, excellent.
sometimes you have to utilize additional flood vents
Right.
to let the water flow.
Yes.
Anytime you
Very
break
careful
up the
with that.
space, you need one flood vent approximately for every 200 square feet of enclosed space. But any room that you build downstairs, you also need 2 openings. But the answer is, yes, you can finish downstairs. You can make it finished space. Everything under base flood has to be waterproof. So. Okay. Okay, we went time frames. Anybody, any questions, particular questions, general questions? Okay. Okay, first steps, just let me touch on that real quick. If you're starting out and you're cold and you don't have anything done, one of the first things that you have to do is a soil boring or an engineering evaluation of your foundation before you do anything else, because you need to find out if the soil where you are will support the load of your house, the increased load based on elevation or the house that you're considering building. Now, if you are doing pilings, whether helical or timber pilings, you don't need to do a soil boring, because the first pile that's installed is a test pile. As long as it is installed to the tonnage required on the plan, there's no soil boring required, so you could save whatever, $1,200 or $1,500 on that one aspect. Okay. And then I'll just touch on, just briefly, on some different ideas about what you can do underneath your house. Once you elevate your house, whether you're building new or you're elevating your house, there's a bunch of different things you can do. Let's just assume that you're building a new house. Well, if you're installing pilings, you can install pilings, just like we've all seen at the beach for 50 years, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to enclose them. You can just install your pilings and build your house, and that's that, and the stairways outside. You can enclose the downstairs with cement board. You can build a pressure-treated wall around the enclosure and install cement board. And you can install garages. You can put concrete there or not put concrete there. Again, everything that happens below the house can be done at a later date. So if your budget doesn't allow that extra $20,000 or $25,000 to finish the entire downstairs, then you can build your house, and when you have the money, you can do that later. You can build cinder block. The walls can be cinder block, in which case that's the wall and the structure. You can build concrete piers, once again with cement board all around. So you have a lot of options downstairs. Some of them are cost considerations. One of the reasons that you want to evaluate your soils and find out what it is that you need to bear, what soil capacity you have, you might need a deep pile foundation, you might need timber piles, you might need helical piles. If you're elevating a house and you have to demolish your old foundation, you might need helical piles to do that. All of that starts with a soil boring and an engineering evaluation of the foundation. Again, we do that. We generally do turnkey operations from beginning to end. Any aspect of that, certainly we have people that find their own architects. We've worked with Scott for almost 25 years. We've worked now with Jason for longer than I can believe. But you can start different aspects of the process yourself. You certainly don't have to retain us for the whole thing. It is easier for you. We stopped advising people to do their own general contracting work several years ago because 105% of the time it's an unmitigated disaster. And every single client we've consulted with who decided to general contract their own project called us between 8 and 15 months later to come fix it. Elevations are difficult, they're complicated, they're not something that you should do if you added a kitchen one time, or built a deck, or built a room over your garage. It is a difficult business. New home construction now in New Jersey, it's, other than Hawaii and New York City, it's the most difficult state to build in the entire country. We have the most demanding codes. Houses that are built here are the best dwellings ever. Literally the best dwellings ever built before in mankind. So it's not something that you want to do yourself. But Jason touched on it, and Kathy usually touches on this in more detail. When you general contract different aspects of your job and try and put everything together, there is not the seamless flow that you want. You don't have one person managing the process. And that's very important to your sanity and your marriage, and your sanity and your marriage. Okay, folks, I have covered a lot of stuff. If there's any questions, we'll be here. All of us will be around for a while. If you don't mind making some notes on comments on the seminar, just great. Vince talked too much. Jason didn't talk enough. You know, we learned a lot. We didn't learn anything. It was boring. Any comments that you have, we'd appreciate. Anyone who has any interest in our offering, you're certainly welcome to take one of these. And thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.